Good and evil are concepts brought about in both real life and in fiction. However, good and evil are also subjective. What might be evil to some is good to others. And this is especially true in war, as it's one of the most pivotal reasons for why war even happens in the first place. As you might have seen by now on my channel, I am a huge fan of Power Rangers, and that isn't changing anytime soon. This show also has a clear-cut presentation of what's good and what's evil. However, even a show as kid-friendly as this knows that it's not always that simple. Today I'm going to be showing you guys an episode from Power Rangers Lost Galaxy titled Loyax's Last Battle, and why the themes of this episode heavily reminds me of Attack on Titan. The plot of the episode is as simple as any other. Loyax, the monster of the week, wants to fight a strong opponent, and in doing so runs into Maya, Lost Galaxy's Yellow Ranger, who is also a very nice person, I might add. The monster initially dismisses her on the cuffs of her simply being a girl, and therefore she is no threat to him. But Maya is more than that. She's a Power Ranger. No matter what gender, she is still a force to be reckoned with. Leo even tries to give her an out by trying to take her place in the fight. Maya doesn't take it though. You fight one Ranger, you fight them all. Fully committed to the mission, she tumbles off the edge with the villain. What's interesting about this isn't her trying to prove anything to the monster, nor to her friends, or even to herself. This is just who she is, and she knows it. She's simply built different. She's like that. She ends up washed up in a cave with an injured leg, and that same monster admits his shame out loud about how he failed to go out in a glorious battle against the Power Rangers, all because of some girl. Maya tells him that being a girl makes no difference. In this context, she's right, because a Power Ranger is a force to be reckoned with regardless of gender. Then something interesting happens. You see, almost 99% of the times, Power Ranger villains are always unconditionally evil. They're almost always animalistic in the way that they just mindlessly attack people. You just assume that they're born that way, and sometimes they actually are. They can have some interesting character traits, and the best ones are even the ones that develop to the point of being human, but there's never a point to where they would help a Ranger out, at least not willingly or without being reformed first. They're normally so animalistic in where their first instinct is to either attack or be as cruel as possible. Here, however, Loyax gives Maya a bandage for her leg and speaks with both wisdom and experience. He isn't following orders, he just knows that at the moment there's no need to fight, and that's what really sets him apart. He doesn't feel like a villain of the week, he feels like a character who has actually lived through stuff before. It's what makes him among some of the most memorable in Lost Galaxy, and in all of PR, to be honest. He's old, and his eyesight is bad. He makes a very sound argument that they need each other to survive, that they need to forget that they're enemies, and work together. They manage to make it out of the cave, and Loyax ends the truce right then and there. Not because he's selfish. Okay, I mean, he is a little bit, but not in a traditional villain sense. It's more so because, more than anything, he just wants to die in a legendary battle. At the end of the day, this is a war between two opposing forces, good and evil. The other monsters show up and they can easily take down Maya. However, Loyax refuses to, essentially jump Maya, and Maya sees this, and she sees that he's a truly honorable man, or monster in this case. They escape, and Loyax gives an old head speech about how back in his day, he used to fight for the side of good, but eventually there was too much evil in the world, and he eventually succumbed to it, becoming part of the same evil he once fought. Maya tries to convince him that it doesn't have to end this way, and that he doesn't need to be bad. He can change. However, Loyax is at the point of his life to where he just wants it all to end. He's old, he's tired, and he just wants to finish this battle on his own terms. Maya reluctantly agrees to fight him, but she does eventually knock some sense into him. The monster general controls him and forces him to fight the Rangers. However, he ultimately breaks free from that control and does the right thing by attacking the general instead. This ultimately leads to the general blowing him up and claiming he chose the wrong side, but Loyax dies thanking the Yellow Ranger. At the beach, they find his sword, and Maya delivers one of the best lines in all of Power Rangers. "You won your last battle. You proved that your heart was still good. That's how I'll always remember you." And then she plants the sword, and the episode ends with this gorgeous shot of the sword implanted as his grave, as all the other Rangers walk away. This episode does a lot of things, but most important one being Maya as a role model. Loyax's initial dismissal of her was arrogant, and he quickly learns humility and how his initial perspective on what makes a warrior was wrong. I can't speak for real life, but I do know that in any world with a supernatural element to it, it'd be foolish to underestimate someone just because of their gender. They'll fuck around and drop a nuke on your ass. What I really want to touch upon, however, is this concept of right and wrong, and how it pertains to Attack on Titan. Loyax did once fight for good, but when he was eventually converted to evil, his perspective changed. To him, that's all he was. That's all he could be. There was no other path to take, especially since, with how old and tired he was, he just wanted it all to end. Similarly, Bertolt, who was once a kind, compassionate friend of the Scouts, you see he too, at a certain point, has already accepted the fact that he was the enemy, and that there was nothing that he could do to change that. Bertolt himself did not see himself as evil, but he has done evil things that has led to him breaking down before in the past. Just like Loyax, he just wants it to be over with. Bertolt isn't the only example of commitment to the role that we see in AOT. Just how Loyax chose to be evil and stayed that way for a very, very long time, there are plenty of other instances in AOT where the soul-crushing question of what if comes into play, followed by just an absolute commitment. Reiner could have called off the mission when Marcel died, but he didn't. He committed. Annie could have gone down to explain things to Eren, but she didn't. She committed. And especially Eren Yeager, who could have used the Founder in a way that wasn't just absolute, can't say the G word here, but he could have used it in a way that wasn't that. But he didn't. He committed to the role of the villain for the sole reason that he had to. And here's what's the underlying difference between these ideas. In Lost Galaxy, Maya talks to Loyax. She tries reaching out to him, and eventually, through some brute force, she does. However, in Attack on Titan, almost every time they try to talk someone out of playing a role that doesn't seem necessary, it backfires. Some people see their goals as just too important to listen to reason. Some people also just like that sense of conflict, which I think is a really good lesson to be taught in all ages. Even Loyax doesn't initially listen, and the brute force it took to subdue him is a great example of how sometimes fighting is the only way. Sometimes you just have to tatakai, tatakai. However, diplomacy is not completely lost. The forest campfire is proof that when people do sit down to talk, things can change. But there's a reason this is at the end of the series and not the midway point. So much fighting can lead to fatigue. Everyone here is just tired. Just like Loyax, they've been through life. They've been through all the fighting and they just want it all to end. Less tatakai tatakai and more of just talk, talk. Maya and Armin are both anchor points of how to change a person through talking. Maya saw the goodness in Loyax and managed to bring it out. Armin always sought to talk things through, and it was eventually through his talking that my man managed to get the aid of Annie and riz her up in the process, even though he should have ended up with Krista, but that's besides the point. The world isn't perfect. There will always be war, and it's kind of nihilistic that I bring this up now, but our current real-world predicaments are examples of that. But with war will always come the hope of peace, and I think that metaphor best represents both of these amazing franchises. Hey guys, Fastlime here, and thanks so much for watching this video. This was my first ever attempt at a video essay, and I hope to improve with it more in the future because, oh boy, this script definitely needed some more work, but I think I managed to get most of my points across, and this will definitely be a learning experience for me. But with that being said, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao!